Greetings my customers. I've run out of bread, so I'm going to make some. I haven't made bread in a while. We've made a few sort of sourdoughs, things like that, but I just want some bread. Now, I'm following a recipe I picked up off Bakery Bits, where I buy a lot of my flours and things like that from. And this one, I think it's Dan Lepard, came up with this almost white bread. So it's mainly made with just ordinary white strong plain flour, strong bread flour, but he supplements it with 100 grams of some wholemeal, but something a little bit different. So you could have rye, you could have spelt, you could have emmer wheat, and that's what I've got in here. So we're just going to mix that in there with that. Now he calls this like an easy sort of relatively no knead bread, because it's going to have a little bit of folding but nothing like your normal kneading. So we'll mix that in there. We're then going to add a teaspoon of fine Himalayan pink salt. Okay, mix that in, and then I've got a teaspoon of active yeast, as it were, dried active yeast. In that goes. Just going to mix that in, and then for a bit of sweetness we're going to add a teaspoon of honey. Now obviously that's easier said than done. I'm just going to add a little bit more of a squirt because I'm probably not going to get all of that off of there. And then the final addition is some warmish water, and what I've got here is 300 grams, which is 300 mils, but it's easier to do it by weight to make sure you get the right amount. And then we're just going to mix all of that together using this dough whisk. I'll call it dough hook. And essentially that's sort of the first part, almost of the kneading in a way. So we're going to get this all mixed together, and then I'm just going to cover it over, and we're going to let it stand. So I'm going to make sure I've got no pockets of flour before I do that. But then once I've done that, I'm just going to get it off that dough whisk, and then we're going to leave it covered over for about 30 minutes at room temperature. And then you're going to want a little bit of oil or butter. Well, you're going to want some butter later, and do a little bit of flour. So that's hence I've still got my bread flour out there. So we're going to be kneading it on the surface as such, and then we're going to be putting it into a 2-pound loaf tin, which I've got there, but we'll butter that, grease it up when we're ready, but that's a little while off yet. Okay, so I'll let that sort of rest for about a half hour, and all I'm going to do is just turn that out for a second onto a lightly floured surface. You could oil the surface if you want, but what we want to do is sort of spread it out into a sort of rough triangle, and then we're going to fold it sort of like that, so over and back on itself. Put some of that flour on there, and then we're just going to let it rest again for another 30 minutes. Okay, so I'll just fold that over, put it back in that bowl. We're going to cover it and rest it another 30 minutes. Now, after that 30 minutes, we'll be preparing it, putting it in the tin, but we still don't want to put our oven on yet because we're then going to leave it in the tin for about an hour. We're now going to remove our dough again. Again, just a light floured surface. Just going to remove that again. And we finish with our bowl this time, because we're now going to be transferring it, when we've rolled it, into the tin. So like I say, it's a 2-pound bread tin, and I've buttered it all over on the inside, making sure I get up in the corners and everything. So once again, we want to flatten this out. And this time, what we're going to do is fold the sides in to the middle, and then we're just going to roll it up a bit like a scroll, he describes it as, and then we just want to sort of gently sort of roll and sort of stretch it so that it will fit into our tin. And then we pick it up, and the seam side should go down into the bottom of that tin. And now again we're just going to cover that over, and we're going to leave that for about an hour. Now we're not expecting it to double in size, okay, that will probably be a bit too much proofing, but we want it to sort of increase, well, in his words, by about a half. Okay, now towards the end of that hour you're going to be wanting to put in your oven on, and we're going to be cooking this in a 200 Celsius fan oven. So if you haven't got a fan, up it by 20. Okay, so you'll need to make sure you're getting your, like I say, your oven preheated, ready for when that is. So here it is. I gave it an extra 20 odd minutes because it's not particularly warm in here. Okay, and it has risen slightly. So all we do now is take a little bit of flour and just give it a light dusting of flour on the top. I could use my flour sifter, but to be honest, it'd be a bit of a waste giving you a little amount of flour. Now you want to slash your top, so you could slash it just down the middle, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make some sort of diagonal cuts. Basically I'm giving it a crisscross pattern, and now that is going to go in the oven for 35 to 40 minutes. When we take it out, we'll just let it cool a little bit in the tin. Better start timing a bit now. We'll let it cool slightly in the tin. It should then contract away a little bit from the sides, and then we'll tip it out and let it cool on a wire rack. So I checked that at 35, and I thought almost there. Let's give it a few more minutes. So I've given it another 3 minutes. I'm just going to turn the oven off. And so, like I say, the first thing we're going to do is just leave it in the tin for a minute or two to cool slightly. You can see here where the steam inside has more escaped out of one side than the other. It feels quite hard on top, and actually it is loose in that tin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tip that out. It is nice and hollow, so we're just going to put it on there now. So although as I've slashed it, it's opened slightly at one point, swollen up there, but it's quite a dense loaf. I think that's partly because of the lack of, we didn't do a lot of kneading with it. But we're going to let that cool a little bit. Really want to let it get cold before you slice it, but I think I might have to do that when it's a bit warm, just to try it out. So I didn't quite wait till it's cold. Still a little bit warm. There you can see nice sort of texture. I've cut the crust off, got a bit of butter on it. Nice crisp crust. The Emma wheat gives it a bit more flavour than just plain flour. What can I say? It's bread, relatively easy to make. Tastes great. A little disappointed we didn't get more of a rise. I think that was just the temperature in here, but I've got some bread, and that's what I wanted.